every once in a while, the signatures, the celestial signatures, have the capacity to present us with a moment of reflection that has everything to do with where we have been and what we're stepping into. And you could say that any astrological moment has that capacity. This particular week brings a very particular emphasis on transition between what was and potentially what will be. Not exactly forming the clearest of perspectives as to what will be, but really engaging very specifically on that transitional phase where something happened. Something is about to happen. And just what that will be remains to be seen. Several factors infuse the energy that this week brings for our consideration. We have a new moon solar eclipse at 28 degrees of Aquarius, and I talked quite a bit about this last week from a personally reflected space because this is happening right on my ascendant, so I'm not going to go into it as deeply this week, but I have to include it because it is, after all, happening this week. This is also the beginning of the Chinese New Year. Right on that eclipse, right at that 28 degrees of Aquarius. This is the beginning of the Chinese New Year of the horse. We're leaving behind the serpent or snake. And can you sense in that some kind of transition that, we've been in the snake thing for, the last not quite 2 years, but have you successfully been able to shed the skin of an old version of you so that the new version of you might be ready to proceed forward? Because the new version of you, that Chinese fire horse, not just a horse, but a fire horse, is something that trying to minimize the kind of energy the horse represents, it would be an error, because the horse represents a very substantial power, a driving kind of energy that wants to, move quickly across a zone of space. I'll read you just a quick. I don't normally do Chinese astrology, but this particular one happening right on my ascendant, I couldn't just, let it slide by inconspicuously. So, I'm going to just read you a real quick excerpt out of a book on Chinese astrology by Susan White. The basic character problem stems from an overdose of native fire. The fire horse lives with a volcano inside them, which threatens to erupt if they open their mouth. Just a crack. At an early age, he becomes aware that his reactions are considered excessive. He cries louder than other babies, laughs harder, and eats more. Soon, his parents begin to perceive him as a perilous pot of simmering milk about to boil over. They handle him gingerly as though he might explode. Yet, despite the inner volcano, our subject is first and foremost a horse. He wants to fit in to a group or social unit. He wants popular acceptance and needs to be cared for and about by his peers and family. The fire horse becomes an early victim of misunderstanding, out of phaseness, ambiguity, confusion, and even fear. You may have sensed in that a certain uptick of, potential that is, kind of, can you feel the horse's feet, stamping? I'm ready to run. I need to be cut loose from any containment that is trying to hold me back. This is part of the flavor of this eclipse that happens on the 17th this week, Tuesday. Actually, it happens real early in the morning, about 4 o'clock here on the East Coast. But the thing about that energy is trying to narrow it down to, the eclipse is at 4 o'clock, is or would be an error of substantial, over-containment of a signature that carries substantial weight. And time, because it's an eclipse. Eclipses are about change. And this particular change from, an old moon to a new moon has the capacity to wake something up in us, give us the permission to release an old version that is, outlived its usefulness to such an extent that something new wants to awaken. And that will require, you guessed it, change. What was fitting into what will be is not always as successful as we might hope that it would be. Those not willing to let go of certain fixed ideas that are holding them back, containing them within a format that is no longer going to be as successful as it had been. When the new puts in a presence that says, wake up. I'm throwing this in because this particular eclipse happens in a square aspect to Uranus or Prometheus, revolution, shaking things up, the shake, rattle, and roll kind of energy that Prometheus says, the reason that I'm doing this is to loosen your grip, if you will, upon the past that may have worked quite well up to this point, but there's something new that I'm trying to awaken you to as a potential new version of what it is that you can become if you have the willingness to release the old and be open and ready for something new to put in an appearance. And is it going to be of the fire horse kind of energy? Are you willing to burn some old bridges, release some old contacts or context that has gotten you to this point, so that there is the availability of your presence in a new environment? Of course, this isn't all that's going to transpire this week. Today's Sunday. Well, we're going to just go ahead to Monday here. You can kind of see that the moon is, yes, it's approaching the next new moon. It will happen, like I said, here on the West Coast at 4 o'clock in the morning. So the symbol, the Sabian symbol for that particular eclipse reads, a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis. And the keynote, the capacity to utterly transform the character of one's consciousness by radically altering the structural patterns of everyday living and the types of relationships one enters upon. I don't have to go into that any more than what I already have expressed for you. On the very next day, the sun moves from Aquarius into Pisces. Can you sense, there's a changing of hats always when the sun moves between one sign and another. Actually, when any planet moves from one sign into another, the changing of our robe, our garments, our hats. This is the sun, a point of vitality that has, just now releasing that Aquarian energy, creative, inventive, communicative experience of what it is that the collective is trying to put forth as a message for all. Stepping from there into the realm of infinite, undifferentiated Piscean space, where spirit is invited into the equation to say, what's the next step that the collective Aquarius has been attempting to prepare itself for, that in this Piscean dance that will be in place for the next month, the sun's vitality is going to awaken us to as a deeper, more profound, interactive zone of space, not just with each other, but with spirit, with the soul, with the creative, undifferentiated zone of interface that we have with our source, with our maker. The symbol for this first degree of Pisces from the Sabian experience in a crowded marketplace, farmers and middlemen display a great variety of products. Can you see that coming out of this Aquarian communal interchange of energy that has brought this to the fore? The keynote, a process of commingling and interchange, which at all levels demonstrates the health of a community. Can you feel we still have that essence of the Aquarian dance in play there? And this brings us to something that, as well, it would do us more effectively to see as a longer term signature, kind of like the eclipse. The change factor, can exist, weeks before the actual eclipse happens and can linger for months afterwards. And we're starting, that eclipse is a new moon, a lunar month, the lunar month, starting with that eclipse idea at the beginning of the fire horse year. Can you feel the presence of an energy that likely is going to linger for a while? Well, the moon, the sun shifting into Pisces, there's another, 30-day experience while we go through the sign of Pisces with that solar influence. And as you can see, the sun, Venus, and the moon moving along, and Mercury, are all dancing their way through this Piscean experience to get to something that has been underway for a while, and that is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction down here at 0 degrees of Aries. The last time these two planets came together at 0 degrees Aries was back around 4300 BC. It doesn't happen very often. I want to place a emphasis upon this particular signature, even though it spans the potential of a much longer footprint, because Saturn and Neptune both were doing a little tickling, shall we say, of the edges of that Aryan world last year. They're then, slip back into that Pisces realm to make sure that the depth of that potential interchange of energies that Pisces represents was filled out effectively enough so that as the Aryan conjunction of these two energies transpires, no longer going to go back into Pisces, we're still able to tune into that deep, penetrating awakening that the Piscean experience brought for our consideration with these two planets. Neptune has an affinity for the Piscean zone. Saturn, maybe not so much. It's still Saturn, because Neptune is kind of like wanting to allow for dissolving and illusions, creative experiences that really can't be contained. Place that with Saturn, whose archetypal signature says, I need a container. within which to format a structure. This is Saturn, and you can kind of see those are very different energies in play here. And they're coming together at 0 degrees of Aries. Now, what does 0 degrees of Aries mean? Well, automatically, when you think of Aries, you get this archetypal signature that says, I need to format a process where something can be born. Brand new, an inspiration of creativity. But let's take a step back. That 0 degrees of Aries is kind of like an impulse or a threshold, a point along a path that is a portal, if you will, into something totally brand new, the very first degree of the zodiac. And being that it is new, I want you to consider this. A baby is born. That's a new thing, the new experience. The baby has just come into the world. He's looking around, and you go up to the baby and you say, "Hey, baby, can you tell us something?" The baby, God, I don't know anything. I just got here, There's a process in the experience of life that at its very beginning has questions. There's something there that needs to develop, but it's not there yet. It needs the interface of its parents, its peers, its educational system to essentially tickle the brain follicles in such fashion that it's given the potential of direction. And you notice I'm not saying a particular direction, just direction, because there is already present in that newborn being a soul. And the soul comes with its own particular set of rules, set of substance that it has gleaned through multiple incarnations. But they're not right at the surface. There's something that has to, be experienced and learned through the process of living. That as one encounters the input that's going to be coming in from all these different sources that are saying, this is what life's about. No, this is what life, that don't always point in the same direction. And this is where that soul aspect that has lived many incarnations starts to awaken, saying, wait a minute, you guys are giving me sometimes conflicting versions of what it is that I am supposed to be as I go through this learning process, yet my sensing, this is the soul sensing, says that some of what it is that you are offering me seems to resonate with a part within me that says this is more true than that. And I'm going to be drawn toward this as opposed to that. So this conjunction between Saturn attempting to create a restriction, a structure, if you will, into something that is totally brand new, and Neptune, that they're both coming out of the sign of Pisces, where the availability of exposure to the unlimited frontier has been at work for a long time, because it takes, 13, 14 years for Neptune to go through a sign. That's a long cycle in that Piscean realm, where the energies, the flow of life itself has been, steeped in awarenesses that do not just exist at the surface level, and have invited us to consider aspects of being alive that span way more than one physical life could ever contain. Saturn, it's been there for 2.5 years, and Saturn's has been trying to format a version out of that Neptunian, Piscean spiritual level of awareness, factors that will hold water. There's your Saturn, trying to be a container in this water zone. Now, back to our portal. The portal between Pisces and Aries sets up a scenario. This is kind of a longer scenario, whereby when you come to the end of an experience, Pisces, the end of the zodiac before the next beginning in Aries, the potential of being able to formulate something that can effectively be the container within which the whole entire zodiacal experience up until Pisces can be weighed and balanced and determine what is worth keeping as something that carries relevance, that I want to see continue on into any future moment. And what do I need to jettison, get rid of, relegate to the dung pile of the past? This is what's happening in Pisces. And since the sun this week goes into Pisces, that process is still at work. But from the perspective of the Saturn-Neptune dance right there at 0 degrees Aries, they've just, stepped through that portal. Mind you, it's been a couple weeks for Neptune. But Saturn, it was just earlier this last week that it stepped across that line, that portal, that threshold into Aries, has have to make the determination, what kind of a seed was formatted in the Piscean dance that I am willing to plant into the ground of the new cycle, Aries. And how much energy have I placed within that creative Piscean context for that seed to be held appropriately as it is planted in that next new moment. There's nothing there yet. This is like pre-new baby. It's like ready to come forth. but it's an organic process that transpires. The newness of the Aryan moment. Nothing is formed. It's more like there's creative opportunity floating in the atmospheres, seeking some level of curiosity to participate with, that has to do with unlimited creative Neptunian imagination and a structural counterpart of Saturn saying, we need to get this shit together. We need to come up with something. But remember, this is so new that any attempts at structural configuration really don't carry that much weight. It is that new that, something that we don't know what is to be is in the process of discovery. So, even though Aries is about, impulse and action and, that creative desire to be, ask yourself, how much of what was might still be lingering and get in the way of something totally brand new that is seeking birth? How fertile is your soil for the newness of life that is right there? We're going to go ahead a couple of days to our Friday, because that's when these two kind of see they're 1 minute apart. Don't get hung up on the mechanics, because this is an interchange of energy that has been in the works for a while and will be for a while longer. These are not both very fast-moving planets. So, relax. These are, this Aries signature is ruled by Mars. Mars is still up there doing its dance through Aquarius. And there isn't really one particular Sabian symbol that kind of is in play as this is all transpiring. So I'm just going to read through, not the complete writing of what these Sabian symbols are, but we'll start out with, where Mars is currently. And I'm just going to read these Sabian, because the Sabian symbols can be used as a divinatory tool. Not so much the hard and fast descriptions of what they are saying, but more like the capacity that we have to feel into the general flavor of what it is that is being considered and determine what is and what is not worth my paying attention to as this cycle unfolds. First, a rug is placed on the floor of a nursery to allow children to play in comfort and warmth. We're still talking Mars here. In Aquarius, the communal space, speaking to that conjunction of Saturn and Neptune at 0 degrees Aries, as, maybe there's something in here that could be of benefit to the creative flow of open-ended opportunity that the 0 degrees of Aries is asking us to ponder as we consider a pertinent direction to head in. The warmth of understanding, this is the same Sabian symbol, the rug with the children. Yeah. The warmth of understanding which comes to those in early life are open to new possibilities. Can you feel the new possibilities that I'm talking about and have been talking about? The next Sabian symbol reads, a big bear sitting down and waving all its paws. The self-discipline which results from an intelligent development of individual faculties under proper training. And the next Sabian symbol reads, I'm reading several here. A man, having overcome his passions, teaches deep wisdom in terms of his experience. The constructive use to which difficult past experiences can be put as examples for those who are still striving to overcome their passions. Can you feel the potential for a lingering past in there that could possibly be a distraction to what it is that is new and open-ended enough to want to experience life in its fullness? And finally, a last one. A butterfly with the right wing more perfectly formed. The capacity to develop the rational and fully conscious aspect of the mind ahead of normal evolution. I know that's a lot of seemingly divergent perspectives to hold, but that's Mars's Aquarian thing saying to the portal at 0 degrees Aries. From the Aquarian perspective, it would behoove us to make sure that there is some form of the collective at work in what it is that the new seed is going to develop into. Though we may not know exactly what that is, it would be beneficial to be as inclusive as possible in the collective version of what it is that will be. There's one other factor that comes into play here, and this is known as the planetary pattern. If you look at where all these planets are now, Jupiter down here at 15 degrees Cancer, all the way up to Pluto at 4 degrees Aquarius, these are all within 1/2 of the chart, within the 180 degrees. This is known as a bowl pattern. And in a bowl pattern, essentially you've got this large area, the whole rest, the other 180 degrees of the chart, there are no planets there. So a bowl pattern can bring a certain energy focalization upon a certain portion of the chart. And this is for the most part, it's the eastern portion of the chart. And the eastern portion of the chart is, hello world, here I am. You can kind of feel the essential Aries in that nature. I may not know what to do, but I am awakening to the potential for something new. That is the East. It's about, the protection of self. Now, in this particular type pattern, there's a planet that's called the lead planet or the cutting planet. And that planet essentially sets in motion because every day, as the world turns, this chart turns essentially going counterclockwise, which gives the impression that these planets, they're rising planets. So every day, as this, let me show you. Every day, I'm going to move this an hour ahead. You'll see the planets rotate in a clockwise direction with Pluto in the lead. Oh, I got to move it fast. Anyway. Yeah, what you're seeing is the ascendant, and because of the type of chart that I have sitting there, it doesn't move like I had anticipated. What it is essentially as we go through every day, the sun, basically it rises, and so you can get all these planets are rising, and Pluto in the lead, as the lead planet, sets a pattern for this particular bull pattern that is saying that from the perspective of all the planets' consideration, right now, with Pluto in the lead in that early degrees of Aquarius, there's a question that surfaces from the Plutonic perspective of how do I experience with Pluto leading the thing, the god of the underworld or the hell realms, or a kind of energy. The Plutonic energy is extremely intense. I don't know if you noticed it, but there's some pretty intense energy floating around right now. And since the moon zips around the chart so fast, we've got basically about a week where the moon is going to, a little more than a week, where the moon is going to be moving within that half of the circle from Pluto all the way down there to Jupiter. And our bull pattern with Pluto as the lead planet is going to be asking us, are you cognizant of a deeper version of the life dance, asking you to pay attention to factors that aren't generally at the surface? Or, perhaps more poignantly, do you see things surfacing now that have been buried from your awareness for some period of time to prevent you from being aware of them? This is Pluto's function, to basically recover what has been buried deep and bring it to the surface. Expose it to your consciousness, to your awareness. And what do you think these days has been buried from our awareness that is coming to the surface? I could go in so many different directions with that, but I think there's an awakening transpiring that the particular cultural, societal directives are not beneficial to very many of us. The Sabian symbol for where Pluto is and will be during these bowl patterns, which happen every couple of weeks, reads, "A council of ancestors is seen implementing the efforts of a young leader." In the keynote, the root foundation of past performances which power and sustain whatever decision is made in a crisis by an individual. And further writing on this particular symbol, the whole past of mankind stands behind any individual effort, especially in times of critical decisions. The endeavor of the priests who built the California missions had behind it the whole past of Catholic proselytizing, i.e., the attempt to bring the good news, in quotes, to all people of the earth. Every individual is far more dependent upon the strength of his ancestors' achievements, or oppressed by their failures and lack of vision, than he usually believes. This can mean a hidden foundation. Can you feel that Pluto in there bringing something to the surface of individual strengths, or the inertia of a tradition unable to transcend its limited origins. This suggests that in many situations, reliance upon precedents will enable the aspirants to greatness to tap the power of his deepest roots. Oh, can you feel the Pluto in there? The deep roots. What on earth are they bringing into exposure now as something new growing? Can you feel that 0 degrees Aries there saying, yeah. I want to, but you have to wait. It's a process, patience, for the sun to provide enough heat to the surface of the earth to be able to bring forth that new growth. It's a system that interacts with the energies of all of life to say, wake up. Well, I've given you a variety of different things to consider there as we're doing this week's pondering, and partly the reason is because this is way more than something as simple as any 7-day consideration. No, these are long footprints that are afoot that this week are bringing poignantly to the surface for our consideration. There is something new, totally new, that is asking us to participate. And I think that's the key. Our willingness to participate individually and collectively in setting forth the opportunity for new growth to transpire that hasn't happened before. This is not a minor consideration. There are processes underway asking us to, genuinely wake up to a being who we could be changing into that will alter the trajectory of humanity. That's all I can think of for this particular I've lost. There it is. Whew, buttons. Buttons, buttons. Who's got the button? Anyway, if any of you are so intrigued as to consider your own particular chart as opposed to the what I can only offer from this particular format, the collective. I do astrological charts. I am the Lively Astrologer, and you can find me at thelivellyastrologer.com. I look forward to being of assistance to each one of us as the avenue that this week's consideration might stir up within us in very unique fashions. Each of us has a part to play in it. What is your part? Thanks. See you later.